Let's talk, you and I. Let's talk about fear. Hey guys, this is DeathGroundReviews. I got another book review for you. I'm just trying to get a little more Stephen King out of my system. Yep, I know I've done a few of his books, and there's probably a lot more to coming. Just giving you a warning. So today I was just kind of digging around in some bins in my closet. I've got a couple bins in there just full of books. And at the very bottom, I dug up this little short story collection by King called Night Shift. I think it was his first short story collection. It was published back in, let's see here. Oh heavens, 1976. So this was like right after, I think, Salem's Lot or something like that, or after The Shining, maybe. So it's a pretty old one. But I know people have often described it as like the gateway drug to Stephen King. You know, a lot of people started out reading Night Shift and then couldn't help it. They got pulled into Stephen King's universe and had to read all the rest of his novels. But this definitely was not the first book I read by King. Skeleton Crew, a later short story collection, was the first thing of Stephen King's I ever read. I was like 17 at the time. I didn't even really get it. I just remember I grew up in a really small town and a very religious community, and everyone was totally just creeped out by Stephen King in the worst way. You know, I mean, I remember people making remarks like how can his wife stand to live with him, and just ridiculous stuff like that. Yeah, people saw King as like a wacko Satan worshiper. I don't know. They imagined him as a pretty weird guy growing up. So that's what I often heard as a kid around me. And then one day I decided just to start reading his books for myself and discovered, he's actually a pretty good writer. He actually has some pretty good stuff. But anyway, sorry, I'm digressing. But yeah, that little bit that I read to you was just part of the foreword to the book. Let's talk, you and I. Let's talk about fear. The house is empty as I write this. A cold February rain is falling outside. It's night. Sometimes when the wind blows the way it's blowing now, we lose the power. But for now it's on, and so let's talk very honestly about fear. Let's talk very rationally about moving to the rim of madness, and perhaps over the edge. My name is Stephen King, etc., etc. When I read this book, I was like 21. I was working at a grocery store. I was dipping into it, you know, during breaks and lunches, and I was doing a lot of homework because I was in college. And so, I don't know, it's been a while since I read it, but I wanted to talk about it with you guys because I remembered really enjoying it, though. Because I was really starting to get into writing myself at the time, and I had this whole collection of cool short stories, you know, that are horror and suspense, and it was like a little creative writing class for horror and suspense right in the palms of my hands, you know. I guess I'll just kind of skim through the book and talk about things that were memorable. First story in the collection is Jerusalem's Lot. Yes, I do actually remember this one. It's sort of a pastiche of Lovecraft, if I remember right. Big, huge rats are in the story. I remember something of like a large church and like a Cthulhu worm-like monster like bursting out of the ground at some point. I remember at the time not really liking it. I think I struggled quite a bit to read it because I had sort of that, you know, Byzantine kind of luxuriant style of language. And so I remember struggling with this particular story. I'd probably enjoy it a lot more now, though, if I read it, because I do enjoy Lovecraft. By the way, I had to do an author homage of Lovecraft. I had to read one of his stories. Let's see, Graveyard Shift. So So yes, the first story, Jerusalem's Lot, is all about huge rats. And then we go to a more updated, modern style story with rats, Graveyard Shifts, about these guys that are working at 2 a.m. in a textile mill, and they're assigned to clean out the basement, and they got to deal with these humongous rats, and they find like some secret passage, I remember, and skeletons, and it was a pretty good story, actually. That story worked really well. Let's see. Yes, Night Surf is the next one after that. So this story was interesting. It was kind of a seed sown towards the development of The Stand, if I remember right. Because we have Captain Trips, the super flu, is introduced in this short story. I guess it's like about a bunch of like college students kind of coping with the apocalyptic scene, and they're living on like a seashore and sacrificing a body. And there's not a lot of plot, I remember, to it. It's more just kind of showing this is what their life is like now after the flu. But I Am the Doorway. So this is a very memorable story. This was one of my favorite short stories by Stephen King. This was kind of, at the time when I read this was an ideal short story. I was trying to achieve a short story of my own to this level of I Am the Doorway. It's about like these astronauts, and they, I think they're like delivering a weather satellite, or they're exploring, they're orbiting other planets like Venus and stuff like that, and I think it has something to do with weather satellites, but they contract some kind of alien virus, and they bring it back to Earth, and it causes like these eyeballs to start growing on their chest and on their hands, and the eyes can see monstrous things, like I think they can see through to like another dimension, and they have murderous, homicidal intentions. Oh man, this was a great short story. Kind of has, it feels a lot like a Twilight Zone, or it would have been a really good Outer Limits episode if they had adapted I Am the Doorway to an Outer Limits TV show. It would have been perfect for something like that. Let's see. The Mangler. To be honest with you, this particular story just made me burst into giggles. I just remember the ending of the giant laundry mangler machine, like marching through the streets. I don't know, just had a very cartoonish ending. I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief for it. Let's see. Another very memorable story. Oh yes, this is the collection that has trucks. I do remember trucks. So this is the story that the Maximum Overdrive is based on. That very silly but fun movie. And come on, it has, AC/DC doing the musical score. You gotta love that. Everyone loves AC/DC, right? But yes, the short story Trucks is in this, and it's just as silly, but it works. I don't know, King writes it with such passion that you kind of just... It's one of those stories that gets on the rim of being cartoonish to the point of silly, but doesn't quite cross it, and you can still suspend disbelief and enjoy it. I like Trucks quite a bit, actually. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is the collection that has Children of the Corn in it. That is oh heavens, I mean, it inspired numerous movie adaptations. The short story in the collection was better. I think part of the reason why is because the corn had a mysterious quality to it, you know what I mean? The corn is very mysterious, and so it suggests a lot more to your imagination, and you kind of end up scaring yourself because of that, because you're sitting there and wondering what the heck's going on in there. The movie, in a way, kind of, I guess, reveals too much. But I just remember finding the short story in the collection far scarier. Oh yes, it has the lawnmower man. I remember reading this and not understanding a thing about it. I don't know if I'd understand it better now, but I remember there was a movie made about it with Pierce Brosnan in it, and very different from the short story. It involved like some virtual reality thing, and I think he like starts getting trapped in it or something like that. I haven't seen the movie since I was like 10 though, so I can't remember exactly, but I know Stephen King tried to sue the film company that adapted the movie because it was so far from his short story, but it's like, he didn't win the lawsuit. And it's like, who cares? I don't even know if the movie was that successful anyway, but oh, let's see. Oh, yes. There's a really creepy story at the end of this collection called The Woman in the Room. And what made it so scary to me was the story it just felt painfully personal. Because I know Stephen King was struggling with, he and his brother observed his mother suffering through cancer. And, watching that, hard to imagine really, but the story just seems closely written to that experience. I mean, here's like one section of it. It reads, "And of course, the cancer now in her began in the womb like a second child, his own darker twin. His life and her death began in the same place. Should he not do what the other is doing already, so slowly and clumsily?" So the character's imagining trying to put her out of her misery, I guess. Instead of watching her suffer more greatly with the cancer, he wants to end her in some other way. I don't know, it just seemed like a very personal story, though, like King was maybe struggling with that same temptation at the time. And I probably would not ask him. I wouldn't ask him that if I ever met Stephen King, by the way. I just, too personal. But anyway, yeah. I dug this out of the bin, and doggone it, I just wanted to talk about it with you guys. What have you have read? Who of you have read Night Shift by Stephen King? Do you have any memorable stories that you'd like to talk about? Did you agree with any of the ones that stood out to me as good or bad? Or I don't know, I'd like to hear what you guys think about old Night Shift. Or just your thoughts about Stephen King in general. So anyway, this is DeathGroundReviews. I'll talk to you soon. Ooh, ha 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 ha!